talked a lot recently about America and our presidential election because, well, they're very, very important things. Elections matter, who gets in power matters. All of these things are very significant and very important to keeping a functional society. Well, instead of talking about America's election today, I figured that we would switch it up and talk about what's going on in France. So, for a little bit of a background, France just had their big election, and it didn't go the way that a lot of people thought that it was going to, nor did it go the way that it was actually shaping up to. This is important for a couple of different reasons. I'll talk about it, how it pertains to France, and then at the end of this, I'm going to tell you how this is kind of a roadmap of what not to do for American politics. So let's go ahead and get right into that. For a little bit more of a background on this election, according to the Daily Wire, the left in France surged to victory in parliamentary elections over the weekend in a shock performance after weeks of momentum for the country's right wing. The new Popular Front coalition in France is made up of communists, socialists, and Greens. The alliance was propelled to victory in the election over the National Rally, which is France's right-wing party, after centrists partnered with the left to block National Rally candidates. French President Emmanuel Macron, who leads the centrist coalition ensemble, worked with the New Popular Front to withdraw 200 candidates from races across France, urging support to consolidate support behind the remaining centrist or left-wing candidate. The National Rally leader, Jordan Bardella, expressed bitter disappointment in the tactic, according to CNN. Now, what we're seeing here is that essentially this new left wing / center wing, I don't really know exactly what it is. It's like a hybrid. They merged the two parties together to make one big party. And in doing so, they also made about 200 candidates drop out of the race. Basically, they narrowed it down to two choices: the candidate from the right wing or the candidate from the left / center. But what's really interesting to me about this party is that the majority, 2 out of 3 of the parties that were merged to make this new Popular Front coalition, are communists and socialists. On their own, communists and socialists are not the people that you would want running your nation. But you make a party with the two of them combined? This is worse, okay? This is not what France needs to have running their nation any more than we need to have running ours. But that's unfortunately what they're going to be stuck with now because of the way that this election was decided. So, what happens when you put communists and socialists in the same party and give them control over a nation? One can only imagine. I mean, I can list on one hand the number of successful socialist and communist nations. Spoiler alert, there aren't any. That's because socialism is bad, okay? Socialism is very, very bad. But France is probably about to figure that out the hard way. Because guess what one of the first proposed policies is? 90% income tax on the wealthy. Yeah, you heard me right. 90%. Thank God this doesn't apply to the entirety of the nation, but even with just the percentage of people that are wealthy, what's going to happen if this plan gets passed? The Economic Times seems to have something to say about it. They said that France is amid a risk of an economic meltdown after high earners residing in France have a chance of paying a very high amount of taxes due to a probable decision by the government to introduce wealth taxes. According to the reports, the wealthy, or incomes that surpass £340,000 annually, can end up paying as far as 90% in taxes in the country, which may end up a majority of this population fleeing the country. Why is France concerned that this will lead to an economic meltdown? Well, after the surprise victory of the hard left coalition in the weekend's elections in France, the country's financials are on a steady decline with a new wave of crisis impeding in the case heavy taxes are imposed on the rich. The parties who have coalition to claim power are planning to increase their public spending to $125 billion. This sum can be extracted by imposing wealth taxes, suggest the reports. Okay. $125 billion, I don't exactly know all that much about European currency and what the equivalent of this in American dollars is. But $125 billion sounds like a lot. And if you're going to be getting this money primarily from imposing a 90% tax on the wealthy people in your nation, you are doomed to fail. Because here's the thing. Those people are going to take their money, their business, their company, whatever it is, they're going to leave and they're most likely going to take that with them. This isn't just going to be one of those whole make them pay their fair share kind of things that Joe Biden's always talking about. This is what the Democrats have been talking about doing over the last few years in America, but I think that if this plan is actually passed in France, we're going to see all of the disadvantages that come with it. This whole taxing the rich more than you tax everyone else thing, whatever happened to equality? That's what I want to know. They say that they want everyone to have equal treatment, unless you have figured out your way to get ahead of the system. Then, they want to make you pay for it. It's just not a good way to run things. If a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. That's a principle that's found in the Bible. That's a principle that was very, very prominent in the founding of America. When the Pilgrims first came, I don't remember which one of their leaders it was, but one of them essentially established a rule for their colony that if you didn't work, you weren't going to eat. You weren't going to have the benefits of living in a productive society if you weren't going to contribute to it. That used to be incentivized. You were incentivized to work hard, to get ahead, to figure out your way to beat the system. Now, if you do so, they try to make you pay extra. In some cases, 90% of your income. But let's keep going with this article and see what else they have to say. According to finance analysts based in France and abroad, there has been an increase in people showing interest to migrate to countries like Spain, Switzerland, and others. The numbers are most surely set to increase if the government gives the green signal to impose this new wealth tax. As you can see, there's already an interest in getting out of France. I don't know if it has anything to do with the election. If I lived in France and that's what happened with the election, admittedly, that would be incentive enough. But this 90% income tax, if that doesn't scream, get out of the nation and do it fast, I don't know what else does. Seeing as how there's already an interest and there are already people that are leaving this nation, I think that if this plan is passed, we're going to see even more. Now let's look at, I guess, the impact of this. If this is passed, there will be a collapse. And there are a few different reasons for this. Like I said earlier, wealthy people will leave and they will most likely take their business and their company and their money, all of that, with them. You become wealthy by working hard and being smart with your resources. France will have a lack of these kinds of people if this plan is passed because, like I said, they're most likely going to leave the country. And last but not least, this is the beginning of a socialist economy. The new left-wing party is partly made of communists and socialists once again. You put those two parties in power, and what is the first proposed policy that you see? 90% income tax. But only for those who have beat the system and become wealthy. Make everyone be on a more equal playing field, right? That's the whole thing about communism and socialism. They claim that everything and everyone is going to be equal. So they're making everyone be on this equal playing field by taking more from the wealthy. In reality, this only drives everyone to poverty. Look at communist China. Look at Venezuela. Look at any communist or socialist nation and tell me that those people are happy, tell me that they are well off financially, and tell me that they are able to provide for themselves, their families, and their communities. There aren't very many nations that are run under a socialist or a communist regime that can truthfully say that. And the reason for that is because socialism it's very, very bad and it doesn't work. So why would it be a good idea to do here? Either way, what we can see from this is that if this is passed in France, there will definitely be a collapse. But what about how this pertains to us in America? Admittedly, France is all the way across the ocean. A lot of people could care less what goes on across the ocean as long as it doesn't directly affect them. But I think that it does. And here's why. Because we can see things like this happening in our own politics, in our own government, and in our own society. Think about it. The Democratic Party has essentially narrowed out prospects of any other candidate at this point. They're saying that they're going to stick with Joe Biden no matter what. And for all that we know, he's probably not going to make it through another term. Which means that we're going to end up having Kamala Harris, but that's a discussion and a trouble for another day. But either way, they're trying to make sure that everyone votes for one person. They're trying to get people from the center over with changing their position on different policies. And all in all, they're just trying to get the entire country against Donald Trump. That's exactly what happened in France. The communists, the socialists, and the Greens, I don't really know that much about the Greens to be completely honest, but communists and socialists, all of these people got together to try to get the entire nation to vote against the right. In France, it worked. In America, I don't know what's going to happen with that quite yet. They could be successful if they rig the election or if there is cheating involved or if something terrible happens. I don't know that the same thing would happen in America. I would certainly hope that it doesn't. But we've seen the track record. They want you to vote against the right. They don't really care exactly which candidate you vote for. They just want you voting against the right. That's what happened here. Then, as soon as these people did get into power, what do we see? We see the implementation of this 90% income tax, which is a whole make everyone on an equal playing field, or as Joe Biden would like to say, pay your fair share. They've been pushing this for years. But what happens when it's actually implemented? I think that we're about to see what happens in France. Ultimately, I think this is a playbook for what not to do in America. But unfortunately, we don't know what's going to happen with that. We could decide to follow that playbook. I sincerely hope that we don't. But all I'm saying, whether it happens or whether it doesn't, is that we need to be watching what goes on in other nations as well. Because we can see what to do and what not to do by learning from the mistakes of those around us. And in this case especially, I think that we're about to see that a 90% income tax is not a good plan. And that once again, socialism is bad. Very, very bad. Thank you for watching this episode of Free Speech with Lila Cortez. If you liked what you saw and heard, make sure that you hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. If you want to hear the audio version of the podcast, head on over to Spotify. It's also just called Free Speech with Lila Cortez. Have a good day. Be blessed. See you soon.